Hello everybody and welcome to today's edition of The View from the Top, and what an amazing, great episode we've got for you today. I think everybody knows how it works. We've been going for quite a while now, but tell us who's out there. We don't know who's out there if you don't say hello. So please join the conversation, write in the comments box, let us know that you're there. We can see you as you start coming in. Tell us where in the world you are. Tell us the sort of subjects you want to discuss. As I said, we've got a fabulous session for you lined up today. Our special guest is the one and only, another one of our top 100 global mobility specialists, and that's Chris Blair from Aviva. Aviva is a fascinating company. We'll be talking about that a bit more when Chris is on stage. I appreciate that some people in certain locations won't necessarily know Aviva, but trust me, it is a very large player in the insurance industry with over, I think, 33,000 employees. And there's some really interesting things going on that they're doing there. So and Chris himself is a really interesting guy. A lot of interesting stuff in his background, his work in fact, how many people in mobility started off their careers in a band, let alone in the Salvation Army. But we're going to find out a lot about Chris when we get him on stage later. As ever, we are, of course, approved for credits. So wherever you get your credits, whether you want GMS credits or CRP or HRCI or SHRM, you can get your credits here. And towards the end of the show, we will be putting up the banner with the details so you can get your credits. Their rules say that we can't put up the banner at the beginning, so you've got to stay with us till the end of the show to actually get the banner. Many thanks to everybody at ERC for giving us the GMS and the CRP credits. ERC, we really appreciate that. And many thanks to our good friends at Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans, who have provided us with the HRCI and the SHRM credits. So many thanks for all of that. Really appreciate that. Next week, I think, as you all know, what we do is we rotate. 1 week we do The View from the Top. The next week we do Benevo Bites. Next week, on the 3rd of March, we've got a Benevo Bites episode where we're going to be talking, in fact, for a second time, about the mobility management platform that Benevo has launched. We think this is really exciting. I'll just give you a quick taster for next week so you can see that. So if you want to find out about the mobility management platform, then do tune in next week. And we're going to be showing you a lot of interesting functionality. We're going to be showing you the employee view, how it links in with your tax provider, your immigration provider, your RMC. Lots of really interesting stuff coming in. I see we're getting people coming in from all over the world, from Southern California, from Nashville, from Florida, from Europe, from San Francisco, from all over the world. So thanks everybody for joining us, for coming on board. The week afterwards, so we said we've got mobility management. The week after that, The View from the Top is back, and I'm delighted to say that we've got Marissa Johnson from Robert Half, and she's going to be joining us on the 10th of March. Again, fascinating backstory and lots of really interesting stuff that she's going to be talking about. So all of that is coming up. The one other thing I wanted to say before we get into the, if you like, the meat and the bones of the show is I'm really super excited to say that the top 100 for service providers is launching today. So let me just tell you a little bit about that. Here we go. So if you're interested in nominating a service provider for the top 100, all you do is you go onto this website, just go onto benevo.com and you'll find it there, and you simply go onto the service provider tab and you can nominate away your favorite service providers. You can nominate up to 10 service providers. They can be in any area of global mobility whatsoever. So it could be tax, it could be immigration, it could be relocation, corporate housing, language, intercultural, technology, what have I missed out? Household goods, any area, spousal support, any area, academia, any area of mobility you want. Just go on that list and nominate whoever you want. And nominations are open between now and the end of March. And then after that time, we'll be releasing our top 100. So that's really exciting. So please do, the more the merrier. We want to get as many people involved with that as we can. What I want to do now is, of course, to move on to our first session and to bring on the one and only, our very own, the legend that is Julia Onslow-Cole.
Hi, Brian.
Hey, Julia, how you doing?
Very well, thanks. Very well.
Yeah, I'm seeing the love coming in from the audience. We're getting lots of applauses. Comment to the audience, please. Do share as much as possible. Give us applause, give us hearts, give us likes every time you hear something, and of course feed in the comments and ask the questions. So, Julia, you're sitting there in the heart of the Middle East, and I believe you're talking to us about the Middle East today.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I just wanted to give a bit of a shout out to Marcin Kubrick and Azim Mohadin for supporting me with this update. But I am here in the Middle East, and I am doing quite a lot of work across a few countries at the moment. And what we're seeing across the whole region is a real tightening on restriction to protect resident labour. Just as an example, and things are changing very fast here, in the last few days, the Saudi government announced that if you were a company that was running a remote customer service center in Saudi, soon all of those jobs in those service centers will be inaccessible to foreign nationals. So companies that are having these facilities in Saudi must change their recruitment practices. And also, effective from the 1st of January 2024, international businesses without a regional headquarters in Riyadh are not allowed to contract with Saudi government agencies. And there was an interview in the last couple of days with the investment minister in Saudi. And he said, if you are going to set up a regional headquarters in Riyadh, then we will support you, and particularly on the Saudiization. And I think one of the things that you've got to understand is that the demographics in this whole region is so different from what we're used to talking about in Europe and the US. For example, 47% of the population of Saudi are between 25 and 54. And that's why you're getting all of these nationalization programs in Oman and Saudi, where they are, really protecting their resident labor. And also, of course, all the countries in the region, like everywhere in the world, are having this sort of impact from COVID, the economic impact. But there is some good news, really good news for businesses that are investing in Saudi that was announced this week. And that is they have announced a temporary work visa category. And that's something that we really could do with across the whole world, which allows businesses to send people into countries and do proper work, but just for a short period of time. And in Saudi, there was this category in 2018 or something like it, and it was withdrawn. And what you have been finding is that companies need to send people into Saudi. It's very difficult to get full employment permission. And so they were sailing a little bit close to the wind, really, in terms of compliance. And so it's really good that companies don't have to struggle with this, and there is a temporary work category announced. And what you have to be is a medium green company. So in Saudi, companies are given different colors according to how they comply with Saudiization. And if you're medium green, then you can go onto your Kiwa portal and you can apply for up to 50 of these visit visas for your employees to go in and work. But 2 words of caution. The first is, now there is this proper route, even more so than before, you mustn't send people in non-compliantly. And the second thing is that, unfortunately, a lot of the visas, the consulates are actually closed still. So, for example, in India, they're closed. Or at least restricted in the sorts of visas they'll issue. So it might take a little while for this to get through the cycle. But when they can go in, they can go in for 90 days in 1 year and come in and out of Saudi. So it's really positive. 2 more things. There's really amazing news in the UAE in that there's now a path for people on the highest kinds of visas, like a gold visa, and who are, for example, top executives or, investors. There's a path to citizenship. And this has been extremely difficult before. And we've had floods of inquiries because people have waited years for citizenship. And again, this is a kind of generic global theme that we're seeing people after COVID feeling a bit more unsettled. They'd like the security. And it's a really good thing that we're seeing all these countries around the world, including the UAE, look at pathways to permanent residence and citizenship. And the last thing I wanted to say is about Qatar.
Before you do, Julia, just a question that's come in and just throw out to you. It's from Diane Claridge. How long does the Saudiization process take? And are they fast tracking now?
Yeah. Oh, Diane, that's such a good question. It can take literally weeks and weeks. So, I mean, if you could put your application in February, or if you're getting a result in February, it could actually, you could have put your application in November. And that's not just because of Saudiization, the very strict requirements that you have to make sure of the person that you're employing and that you're within your Saudiization quota for your company and your sector, but also because of the document procurement process, which is very, very long and drawn out. So, but I think that the good thing is that the government really realizes that steps need to be taken to expedite the process. And, there are really meaningful things that are happening very fast in Saudi. And hopefully this period will get shorter. But I just wanted to finish by saying something about Qatar, because as you know, in January, they lifted the blockade. And I did have Azim Muhuddin, who's our partner in Qatar, visited me in Dubai at the end of last year, and he'd gone on this amazing journey just to get to Dubai. But now it's really good and you can travel around the region. But in Qatar, there's still huge restrictions on family visas. And these have been in place for a year. And every day we're getting lots and lots of inquiries saying, what can we do? And really, it doesn't look like it's going to change any time soon because COVID's quite high in Qatar. And really, the answer is to negotiate on individual cases.
Okay, so thank you so much. And there from Diane. Thanks, Julia. Font of all knowledge.
Oh, well, good questions, Diane. Yeah. Okay,
well, we'll see you again at the end of the show, but let's move on now. We've talked about immigration. Let's move on to tax. And I'm delighted to bring, of course, our one and only expat Pat onto the show. Okay, it's time for Tax with Expat Pat. So give it up on
Hi, Brian.
Calls coming in. Good to see you as ever. I'm being so good this week. I got rib last week for talking about the weather. I haven't mentioned it once.
Oh.
So there we go.
Okay.
So we won't talk about the weather, but instead, let's talk about tax. What have you got for today, Pat?
Well, I wanted to talk initially about tax deadlines. And you may recall that last show, 2 weeks ago, we talked about getting ready for tax season. And now we're 2 weeks into it. How is tax season in the US going so far? It's not too encouraging, unfortunately. And this could be a tax season like no other. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. So if you recall, so if you recall, they issued stimulus checks very late in December. They had to get them out by January 15th. And a lot of different programming changes had to be done at the IRS so they could accept the tax returns that were being submitted. So that's the reason why there was a delay. The only problem is that the Internal Revenue Service also never got through with tax season from last year. There's this huge backlog of returns from last year. I think in part because a lot of the service centers were closed during the pandemic. So letters were not responded to. Tax returns that were mailed in weren't being processed. And even as of now, 1 year later, there's about 6 million tax returns from 2019 that haven't yet been processed, and a huge mountain of correspondence.
So what happens then if the tax return hasn't been processed?
Well, there you go. That's part of the problem. The IRS started issuing these automatic notices to people saying, hey, where's your tax return from last year? We're expecting it. And they shouldn't be sending those notices out when we know that there's probably 200 to 300,000 of those notices that are impacted by those unprocessed tax returns. So, yeah, it just goes to show how there is a trickle-down effect of sorts with the pandemic. Remember, the IRS did not have remote workers as a concept, generally speaking. So they actually shut down a lot of their operations during the height of the pandemic last year. And Brian, can you think of any other country that hasn't processed tax returns in a year and now we're starting again? I mean, has there been any other place like that you can think of?
Not that I can think of, no. I mean, obviously countries have allowed people to delay payments.
Yes, exactly. That's totally understandable. But, you know, this is a little bit unique, I think. And the IRS even issued a statement last week talking about how they're, sending out these notices by mistake, and they acknowledge that they shouldn't have been sent out, and they're encouraging those that haven't yet submitted their 2019 returns to go ahead and submit them. But it will be an interesting play on tax season. And let's not forget that this is, as I mentioned, a tax season likely to be unlike any other here in the United States, with pandemic, people working remotely, a lot of new tax provisions that are coming into play this year, and even Congress is getting involved with this. They sent a request to the IRS to delay the tax return deadline, like was done a year ago. If you recall, a year ago, they extended it by 3 months so that returns could be submitted by July 15th instead of April 15th. And they're asking that the IRS consider doing that again. Unfortunately, just yesterday, the commissioner, his name is Chuck Reddick, he testified in front of Congress yesterday and, quote, we have no present plans to extend the filing season. So he's acknowledging that a lot of people are asking, but as of now, it is still stuck at April 15th. But even yesterday, they have extended the deadline for people impacted by the winter storms in Texas. So they're going to get an extra 2 months to file their returns to June 15th. And you're familiar with the rules for expats outbound from the United States. They automatically get a June 15th deadline.
Of course.
So,
I see a comment here from Joel Williams, not to get too political, but when you starve the IRS of funding, this is the type of service you get. But let's move on.
Yeah, I agree with Joel on that. That is so totally true. I mean, I just really feel sorry for those IRS agents and all the people working there. They never got a break from tax season. They're still in it. And
we've talked about, if like, the bad news of the fact that the IRS is struggling. I think you've got some good news for us from Denmark.
Yes, some interesting news that caught my eye. Denmark is proposing a bill to provide some tax exemptions for expenses related to COVID-19. And two main proposals that I wanted to highlight. An exemption from wage taxes that employers can give a gift card valued up to kroner 1,200 per year. And it's what I find interesting is what is the gift card is intended to spend. It's basically to try to help those industries that were impacted most severely by the pandemic. So you're expected to use that gift card to purchase hotel services, restaurant services, entertainment services. These are all industries that have been impacted by the pandemic, even going to museums, theaters, and cinemas. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in Denmark. It can be within the EU or an EEA country as well. So I found that a little bit interesting to try to help promote the economy. And then the other wage exemption, which is no surprise, is that employers can provide for expenses tax-free for COVID testing and PPE, so that helping to limit the spread of the infections. So those are supposed to go into force as of retroactively as of January 1st of this year. So that's the plan.
That's fascinating. It was good to see some good news. I think we're going to see more of that economic stimulus coming, around the world, as well as people, governments are struggling. I know on the one hand, they've got to raise tax to pay for the thing. On the other hand, they can't raise tax because they need to stimulate the economy.
Tug of war going on, that's for sure.
Absolutely. It'll be interesting to see how that one plays out. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you again at the end of the hour, Pat. But what I'm going to do now is we've got a really special guest coming on. I'm delighted to say we've got Chris Blair from Aviva joining us today. So, dear audience, you know how it works. Let's see those online clapping and hearts and likes, and let's show the love as we bring on all the way from, in fact, he's just outside Norwich in the UK, the one and only Chris Blair. So let's bring Chris Blair on. Chris, I tell you, is going mad. The heart and love that is coming up there, thumbs up. It has exploded. You've obviously got all your family out there, and your actually, I gather you've got quite a large family.
I do have a large family. If any of the eagle-eyed people on LinkedIn would have seen a post that I have in our family. So here in Heatherset, just outside Norwich, we have 5 children and a puppy. All under the age of 12, so it makes for interesting weekends. And we have the very definition of a modern blended family. So I have 2 children who live with an ex-partner. I've got 2 stepdaughters, and then we have a 4-year-old. And we are the stereotypical people that during the pandemic lockdown, we did, just to add to the chaos. We got a little cockapoo puppy called Oreo as well, so it's a bit full on, put it that way.
Yeah. Well, that's just wonderful. And looking at those pictures in that opening video, I mean, Norwich just looks beautiful. What a place! You must be very lucky to be living somewhere quite so lovely.
Yeah. We're super lucky, and where we live, it's a tiny village, literally just on the outskirts of Norwich. So, of a night time, it's peaceful and quiet. You hear the church bells ringing. There's a little local pub, that kind of thing. But then we can get straight into Norwich. When the pandemic calms down and we're able to go out and have meals, to go to the pub. So yeah, very, very lucky. And obviously Norwich Union and Aviva, kind of hence being in Norwich. And it's only a short train ride from London. So a lot of colleagues on today from London, hello. But when I have to travel to London for work and for play, it's not too difficult to get to.
And people are asking to see Oreo. So if Oreo's inside, don't leave the screen.
I'd have to leave the screen. And to be honest, he's not very well at the moment. We found out, if anyone gets a puppy, make sure you research what plants are in your garden, because we didn't. And then we found out he'd been eating some of our chives in our herb garden, and they're poisonous to dogs. So he's a little bit. He's a little bit under the weather now. So if he makes an appearance, we'll bring him on.
A bit of love for Oreo. But I'm going to move on this conversation because wonderful that Oreo is. I think we'll focus a bit on other things. But anyway, I'm listening to you speak, and I'm not hearing Norwich. I'm hearing Liverpool.
Yes,
that's where you grew up, and
that is home.
Yeah, you told me when we were chatting earlier that you started your career in a rock band, or you said I think you said soft rock, was it, or pop rock?
It was a folky, like soft rock band. Straight after college, first thing I did was joined a band. That age old.
No good music's ever come out of it. I don't know what
none whatsoever. None whatsoever.
Yeah.
I certainly wasn't as successful as some of the music that's come out of Liverpool. But yeah, so we joined a band. I toured around various pubs and clubs and stuff in the UK for a year as a band called Decora. And it was fun. It was great. I think the problem was by the end of the first year, when money started to run out, I suddenly realised how much dedication. I think a lot of people talk about bands, but I think what I learned in that year is the sheer commitment and dedication that you have to go to the sticky pubs and the grotty venues and really, really persevere. I love playing. I still play. I'm in a band. Obviously, we can't practice at the moment, but I'm in a band here in Norwich. I absolutely love it. But in terms of that full-on doing stuff constant, by the end of the year it became so draining, it wasn't something I wanted to do. But yeah, that's where my origins started.
And I know we won't spend too much time talking about soccer, because I know it's a sore point, but Jurgens asked the question, red or blue, and I know sadly you're on the red side of Liverpool, aren't you?
I am the champions of England currently. Let's leave form out of it for those who like football. But yeah, I'm a big Liverpool fan, as with Nitzan. Actually, Nitzan is a really big Liverpool fan from Benevo and other people in the industry that I know.
Together, there's actually a Liverpool FC WhatsApp group.
We do.
Global mobility WhatsApp.
We do have a globe. If anybody would like to join, absolutely, please come join in. We're at present we are commiserating quite a lot in the form that we're in. But yeah, big Liverpool fan.
So anyway, so you started off as in rock music, and you now do it for fun. I tell you, obviously, I used to be in the events business, and if I put on a real world event one day ever in the future, we might see whether we can get a global mobility rock band to be our guest band at the event. That'd be.
I would be up for that. That would be
a real giggle. There should be a special award for rock musician, mobility's rock musician of the year. But anyway, you went from there to the Salvation Army. Now, that seems a fairly unusual career move of itself. Unless, were you in the Salvation Army band? I mean, are you like out of Guys and Dolls or something?
So I grew up. My grandma was in the Salvation Army when we were kids, and she used to live with us, and she used to go missing every Sunday. And so we asked, where she went, and we went, and yes, I played the brass band and the cornet and all of that kind of stuff. And then from there, I ended up basically wanting to. I realised that. Apologies if anyone plays a brass instrument, but it's not very cool, compared to a guitar and singing. So I moved into guitar and singing. But as part of when I was away and doing the music stuff, I got very interested in just in people and in youth work particularly. And it was the youth work that took me to work for the Salvation Army, and I did that for 7 years, where I worked with communities and young people, and I worked with youth offending teams and tried to kind of see the positive influence that we can be on people and on families and on young people, and that's what brought me back to Norwich, because I took up what's called a divisional youth officer position in Norwich, and then from there I obviously settled in Norwich with my children here and stuff. But I'd say those years of a youth worker were incredibly formative, even for how I am now as a person, in terms of the importance of people, the importance of the differences between people and the characters in people, and the difference you can make in how you are with people. And sometimes I get that wrong, and sometimes I get it right. But massively formative, them 7 years. I have a lot to owe the Salvation Army for the kind of character I became, and the person I became, before moving into kind of corporate world with Aviva, really.
Okay, well, I suppose you mentioned Aviva. I suppose we ought to actually turn the conversation to Aviva and to global mobility. I know you've got a lot of people out there in the LinkedIn world from Aviva who are watching. A lot of your friends are out there. So let's just talk about that. But actually, I think I'll just start off with one of my fun facts. I always try and do a little fun fact. So. So here's our fun fact. I mean, we've had companies on, from all sorts of industries, and we had a couple of weeks ago we had Ray Kirby on from Twitter, which was founded, I think, back in 2006, which was just 15 years ago. Aviva, I know, can trace its root back. I was researching you guys, and to, I believe it's 1696, which is 325 years ago. And back in there's an original logo. Well, actually, that might have been from the 1800s. But Aviva traces its roots back to a company called the Hand in Hand Fire Insurance Company, which was started after the Great Fire of London, in the days where you had a logo outside your house, and if you had that logo and you're on fire, then they would come and put out your fire. And if you didn't have that logo there, they would leave you alone. So anyway, we had one of the youngest companies on with Twitter, and now I think Aviva may well be one of the very oldest companies that we've had on the show, dating, as I said, all the way back to 1696. But anyway, there's our fun fact. But let's just start talking about global mobility at Aviva. Tell us a bit about your program and how you run things at Aviva.
Yeah, so our program operates across our key markets, which covers the whole globe, albeit the number of markets we're in is quite light compared to some companies. But we operate in Asia Pacific, so we're APAC. We operate in EMEA, so we've got European markets in UK, Ireland, France, Italy, Poland. And then in North America, we have an investment arm in the US, and then a general insurance business in Canada. And the GM team, it's been around for some years, and people a lot of the industry know in terms of Simon Rogers and from Talent Mobility. He used to kind of lead the program, and then up until recently we had Viv Mott, which a lot of people in the industry know, who is leading the program. And the program is quite.
Mel O'Hara too's with you, isn't she?
And now we've got Mel O'Hara, who is our head of, and we operate across really 4 standard policies. So we have standard long term, standard short term for anything we're up to 12 months, commuter, and then permanent moves. Pre-pandemic, our moves were anywhere between around about the 100 and 110 moves a year, 100 moves a year, up to about 130 to 140 moves a year, and we've got we had a number of other projects on in terms of financial talent programs, graduate programs, and we did have a program out in California in terms of Silicon Valley and how we get our IT digital teams out there. So we've had quite a varied program base. However, obviously the pandemic, like a lot of mobility teams, has put a challenge to that in terms of numbers, and it has seen our numbers reduce. But obviously our remote working and our virtual assignment work all of a sudden go through the roof as well. So standard things we deal with, obviously like tax complexities. Certainly at the moment, there's a lot of cross-border move conversations that are happening. And then my role prior to kind of a change in role in January this year, but my role has been very much to look at the function as a whole, which was operating in a very logistical, transactional way about 24 months ago, 18 months ago. And my role was to really look at that and to try and bring about change and look at how can we be more efficient, but actually how can we drive more value out of our function. And so we've had a fair bit of change in Aviva recently, in terms of structure, in terms of our approach to processes and stuff. So traditional, but we're trying to move away from that and more into that business partnering space, more in that how do we be the experts, how do we be the consultants who advise and give, people can rely on what we say to be true and to be accurate, but the actual decisions and budgets and stuff that gets decided, that sits in the appropriate place. So that's kind of where we're shifting to.
Okay, and we've had a question come in here from Jeremy Chander, and it's quite a big, detailed, thought-provoking question. I know there's a lot of stuff that when we were chatting earlier that you've said that's very thought-provoking and challenging. We'll be getting onto that. But Jeremy said this. He said, "Hi, Chris. I'd like to know what your views are regarding the future of mobility. In your opinion, will it be technology-driven? Will personalization still exist? And will this remain a totally human function? Or do you see more of a blended approach?" My gosh, what a question, Jeremy.
Cheers. Thanks, Jeremy. It's a nice, easy one just to ease us into the time.
Let's start with a quick one. I was just asking the name of your dog.
Let's get the dog back, and then everyone will just forget about mobility for 20 minutes. I think the problem with technology is the moment people start to talk about it, I think we will become less human, we'll become less engaged. Technology should never be a replacement for the human element of what we do. It should never, ever be. What it should actually do is should enable the human element of what we do. Yeah. Technology is an absolute enabler. Do our businesses want us to be spending time copying that cell there to that cell there in Excel several times and spend an hour on spreadsheets because we haven't got the data analytical tools, or spend 20 minutes writing an email because we haven't got templates or automated email systems? Technology is the bit that takes away the bit that isn't human. That's the point. The point is not to replace the human element, but to take it away. That's what I see technology as. So I don't think it's even a blended approach. It's about recognizing and looking at why we exist as a function, why we exist in our roles, and saying, let's take the stuff out that doesn't add value to why we exist, so that we can do the stuff that really adds value, so that we can help the people who are struggling because their daughter's got ill and they need support because the international health insurance policy isn't clear. That adds value. That adds support.
I know we were talking about it earlier, and this really is, is an existential question. The way you phrased it, and I think that's where we're getting to now, was this: why do I have a job?
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about, because that's a pretty radical question.
Yeah.
Why do I have a job? Tell us a bit about thinking around that.
So when I embarked on the journey to with the team, and when the whole team kind of came along with us to really look at what the purpose of our mobility function was, we use a way of thinking and a process called systems thinking. And systems thinking isn't a design methodology or root cause analysis. It's about understanding that the world is full of variables and full of different influences that impact how the world works. When you take that down to a process level, you actually start to ask the question of, when you look at, let's say, a tax return process, what value does this add? All the variables that go in, which create delinquent lists or whatever, what is the impact? You cannot look at any problem within mobility in isolation, because there is far too many variables that impact it. And the reason why I always come back, and as a team we ask the question of just what our purpose is, why do we exist, why do we have a job, is its absolute simplest. We exist because we have customers. So I have a job because Aviva has customers. If we were talking earlier, I'm sure there's people on the call that have Aviva policies. Without Aviva policy holders, we can't have a job, because they pay. Their premiums come in, our salaries go out. It's simple business.
So you exist because of me. If I have an Aviva policy, yeah.
Exactly. So then it comes like, so what is my role doing to enable the business to support and really drive our customers' outcomes, not our employees' outcomes, our business, but our genuine customer? How does moving a CEO from Canada to the UK and all of the bells and whistles that might come with that package, how is that a commercially viable decision that benefits our customers? And
let me just come in on that, because I think I'll just put a heading up here. Again, we were talking about it earlier, is that I think the challenge, and it's fascinating, I think this is a challenge we should all ask ourselves every single day, which is, what do I do that really adds value? That's what you're saying, isn't it? And you're talking about moving that CEO. What am I doing in that move that is genuinely adding value? Tell us about
in systems thinking, like process design and mapping, you talk about two things, and the terminology of it isn't great, but they talk about value and waste, and anything that doesn't improve the outcome for the customer is waste. Now, it doesn't mean that it's not important or you don't have to do it. That's not what we're saying. It's just saying that the very thing you're doing isn't a value add perspective. Now, we slightly tweak that in our team to say, look, if a task that we're doing on a day-to-day basis, we're thinking, why am I doing this? Why am I spending my time doing this? Why? I cannot see. Well, we've got to be challenging ourselves. We've got to have the courage and the bravery and the determination to really look inward and say, why am I doing this? Well, what is the purpose? And for us, it comes all the way back down to that purpose. You cannot. I'd actually, let me just digress a little bit. I was talking to a friend yesterday, Simon Mason, who some of you may know from Crable. And I said to him something that resonated with myself while we were talking. That
if you're out there, Simon, on LinkedIn World watching, there we go.
There we go. I'll come back to this question in a minute. But purpose is why we live. We all live for purpose. We're currently saving to do our house up, right? So there's a purpose to my income, and there's a purpose to why I'm saving, which is why I don't go out and buy a PlayStation 5, or why I don't go out and we just don't spend lots of money. Purpose is intrinsic to the thing that motivates us to change and to see things through. And in our mobility teams, how much do we really thrive on purpose? Really understanding the value add and the commerciality to our businesses. What do we bring to our businesses and our teams? And really drilling back to that purpose. From that purpose, this value question can be asked, because you then start to understand, well, if it's not really achieving our purpose, why am I doing it? If what I'm trying to achieve.
I see Mike Hibbert. I'll pull that comment up there from Global Expat Pay. He's put, the why question is a great one. It's a simple way to start a change. In other words, what he's saying is, before you do anything, you should be asking yourself a question, not what am I doing, but why am I doing it?
100%, and even down to simple things like Mike, who does the Global Expat Pay stuff. Simple things like, why am I filling in a payroll instruction spreadsheet? And it isn't to say that you shouldn't, or that you don't end up going, there's real value in this, but ask the question why. Really delve deep, because you'll feel great at the end of it, because you're adding value. That you're bringing something to the table for your team and for your business. In terms of the question that Simon asked, I think whether or not we have systems thinkers develop, and systems thinking is a thought process and a mindset. I think the point is, we need to get to a point where we have people that understand these variables in mobility and these challenges in mobility that impact us from all angles. And we'll look at it from a holistic end-to-end viewpoint that will see that we cannot work in isolation. We cannot solve any of these problems by technology. Technology will not solve the problems in mobility if we haven't seen the whole process as an end-to-end issue that requires us to review the various impacts which are external of our teams, which are external of many of the things that we have control over. So I would hope so. I want to start a conversation. Simon and me have many conversations about this, and I'd love to somehow just get us talking about this in the mobility industry. Really try to challenge our thinking and see what it does. It might fall on its backside, but we'll have a lot of fun doing it. Put it that way as well.
Because you said something fairly radical when we were talking again earlier. You said, and I'll put it out there because I think we might get some pushback on this, but I'm going to put it out there. You said, let's stop talking about return on investment.
Yeah.
That's a challenging one. I expect there are people out there who are going to disagree.
I know. There's probably right now there's people pounding on a keyboard with comments going, what? Look, I think whenever I've kind of landed on this thought process, and I've said it to colleagues and at various other events, I'm not saying that return on investment is not important. So I want to be really clear about it. I'm not saying just throw it in the bin. It's a pointless metric. What I'm saying is that in my short period in mobility, I've heard so many people talk about it and very few people come up with tangible solutions. And when I've actually gone away and gone, right, okay, well, what is return on investment? And more importantly, going back to that why, ask the question, why am I even asking the question about return on investment? Like, why am I actually asking the question? Because is return on investment a mobility question or is it a business unit question? Now, this is specific. I need to frame that this is from my experience of Aviva. In Aviva, we don't have centralized mobility budgets. Budgets are paid for by the business. Yeah. So all of the funding the investment is made by the business. Now, return on investment has so many variables in there that can impact it. The assignee's temperaments, their family situation, their financial situation, the manager's temperament, the market's current performance. There's so many variables to return on investment that is too difficult from a GM perspective to really try to create any degree of metric that will measure that. Where I come from, and what I would like to see us talk about more in mobility industry is our impact on return on investment. As a mobility team, we can impact the return of that individual by giving them a really, really poor mobility experience. We can impact it negatively. We can never, well, I wouldn't say never, but it'd be difficult to impact it positively. I would argue, I think it's a neutral position. So make sure that you essentially stay out of the way by performing a really great service for mobility. I think that could be challenged and that could be a conversation that we have. But certainly an impact on return on investment is something that I would rather see us talk about. How do we get in the way of the potential return on investment and leave the actual return on investment bit to the people that are investing, the business units that have got the people and they're doing the work for, because they're the ones that can measure that in metric, rather than how do we create some degree of dashboard and metric which really says that in 15 years' time, this graduate will be a CEO. How on earth would you measure that? And that's why I would challenge, kind of change the conversation. Don't get rid of it. Don't throw it in the bin. Change it.
Are you saying, I just want to push back on this, are you saying that we shouldn't be asking for that proverbial seat at the table? That we should know our place, and our place is to facilitate mobility, but not to strategize. I mean, I think
has anybody ever had the feeling of like you say something and it comes back to haunt you or bite you on the backside? So, yeah, I am. I think again, this is another phrase, seat at the table, that I've heard a lot of in 5 years, and I wonder what table. I really want, like, what table are we talking about? Like, what position of either authority or power do what is it we're asking for? Now, again, to quantify, I am not saying that influence and the ability to be the expert consultant and the person that's given the guidance and the person that's really given as much context to the decision makers as possible. That's massively important. Absolutely, 100%. But the seat at the table bit, for me, that's where we provide the information to the people who are sitting at the table. We ensure that the people sitting at the table making the decisions have the right information and the most up-to-date information for them to make an informed decision. And so mobility, I love what I do, and I said this to you, Brian. I've landed in this role, and I absolutely love it. Hopefully, people on LinkedIn can hear I'm passionate. I honestly, genuinely,
it's not rock and roll, but
it's not rock and roll. But I absolutely love what I do. But let's pour context and frame what our various functions are there for. We are enablers. We are a support function. We're not the rock star function. We're not the front of house. We're not the sit at the seat of the table. We support, and our support is massively important. It is important in the conversations regarding remote work and permanent establishment issues, and making sure the right decisions and the right conversations are coming out, from our senior leaders. Were absolutely essential and really important. But just get it in context. And that's my point about stop that conversation about seat at the table. Start the conversation about influence and how are you able to ensure that the right people have the right information who are sitting at the table. It's very subtle, but for me, it's a really important subtle difference in how we turn. One's quite a defeatist thing, which is I don't have a seat at the table. The other one is a real enabling positive thing, which is saying, how do I influence the people? How do I enable? And that's the difference between the two.
And to me, that sort of roots back. I know we talked about technology before and technology being an enabler, which I buy into. But I think there's something more than that. And that's something that we've talked about on the show before. And obviously it's part of the Benevo platform. We've talked about it on the show, which is that if you can use your technology to give you predictive analytics, so you can predict which assignments are likely to fail, which vendors are not delivering on the way they should be, which moves need certain aspects to them to maximize impact on the business, and you can predict that, and then you can go into your CFO or CHRO or even CEO with the data to say, this is what is going wrong, or this is what could be done better, and here is the data to prove it. Then I think you're actually in a strong position to influence that table, even if you're not sitting at it. But if you can't do that, if your head is stuck in spreadsheets and fighting fires, then you can't actually have that strategic mindset that I think we're all aiming for, however we describe it. I do want to move the conversation on to a different subject. Again, it's something we caught up with on earlier, which is one of the things you were saying is that in your view, there's two camps of global mobility professional. There are the people who are primarily focused on assignee experience, and the people who on their data jobs are primarily focused on the importance of mobility being a business control. And I wonder if you just expand on that, and let's get into that debate about what our role is and what we should be doing.
So again, I think there are two camps. I wouldn't say that everyone falls into one or two. I think it's a spectrum, and I think I've met a lot of people who understand the balance between these two, sometimes opposing viewpoints. But I think there are a lot of people that do kind of sit between the extremes of a lot of the conversations about how to assign experience. Why do we not give them cultural training? Hold on, there's got to be fairness, and equality between what the CEO gets and the graduate gets. There's a lot of people sitting in that camp. There's a lot of people sitting in the cost control policy. How do you manage a program in that way? I think for me, I think we miss sometimes, and again, I'm not saying this is everyone. I think there's a lot of people that don't miss it, but I think sometimes we miss that these two things are two sides of the same coin. You're still solving the same problem. That they are not opposing positions, they're differing positions. They're looking at the problem from different angles. The assignee is looking at it from a personal perspective, whether they've got 5 kids and a dog. I don't know many programs that would want to move me with 5 kids and a dog, but that's my assigned experience bit. Then you've got the business control around budget, around, kind of risks, and they're all of them issues are a part of the problem. I would say, in the same way that you might talk about political left and political right, I'm a GM centrist. I want to have both. I want to have my cake and eat it. I want to get the assigned experience bit right and the business control bit right. I want to get that solution, which makes sure that the assignee is aware of why business control is there, and making sure the business is aware of why the assigned experience is important.
How do you do that? I mean, that's an easy thing to say. I want to get both right. Okay, let's ask the hard question. How?
Yeah. So again, come back to. I think somebody wrote in the comments earlier that that we're a people business. What we do is people in the business, and with the assignee is people, and people respond differently to people as they do just a decision. Like for me, what I would like to see, and we're not there yet, but what I would like to see pioneered is more fluidity. More fluidity in what we do. So we're not so stringently kind of going, here's a policy, that's what you get. Here's a policy, that's what you pay for. But we're understanding the difference between an individual and what the business want. We can come back to, so if you come to business control, I would challenge anyone on the call that's ever had it where you're moving a CEO and the person that's designing the package is really restrictive on the benefits. Yeah, so business control is a myth when it comes to policy and cost constraints, because when you're talking about a CEO, they go out the window. And I would agree with that. I actually agree with that position. However,
well, that's easy when you're at the CEO level.
But that's
always go out the window at the CEO level. But what about down the food chain?
But why would you? So why would I expect our business unit to invest nearly 150 grand on a short-term move for a junior graduate? Like for me, that I understand the business's viewpoint on that. I actually 100% agree with the business's viewpoint on that. However, I also understand that, let's say a business wants a project leader to go in, and that project leader has a pet, or that project leader has something that's not in policy, and the business goes, it's not in policy. Do you know what? I'll give them, I don't know, a 40-foot container that they don't need because it's in policy, but I won't give them the pet shipment, or I won't give them the exception that they do need. And this is what I mean about people. It's about engaging the parties. It's not about arbitrarily, transactionally. And this comes back to the point I said about where we want to go to in terms of business partnering and consultant. Not doing that bit. There's a great quote by a guy called Fitzgerald. I think his first name was Scott Fitzgerald. Wrote the Great Gatsby. American writer, and he said the true test of intelligence, and I don't think I'm intelligent, but the true test of intelligence is an ability to hold two opposing ideas, and still function. At times, the assigned experience and the business control are two opposing ideas, but if we can somehow see them as two sides of the same coin, and understand that there are people in the middle of this that need engagement. And then that comes back full circle to the technology point that we were saying about Jeremy, giving you space, giving you time so you can do the human bit, understand the assignee, understand the business. And that's where our role becomes intrinsically important in terms of how we bring those two opposing sides and bring them together.
I think these are and discussions, not or. It's not this or that. It's actually
absolutely
this and that. So in fact, to change that, it's not assignee experience versus business control. It's assignee experience and business control. And we need to be able to do both. And going back to the beginning, and it's a comment I've made before, which is if you're juggling a lot of balls, you're going to drop some. The easiest way of juggling a lot of balls is to actually put some down and focus on the ones that are important. And what we're talking about here is let's use technology. And obviously I'm biased because I'm with a tech company, but let's use technology to actually take out some of the difficult, mundane stuff like spreadsheets, so that actually we can focus on the important things like delivering the impact to our business or maximizing the assignee experience. And that's what we should be doing, is we should be using that technology as the enabler to free us up to actually do what we should be doing. And getting back to a point you mentioned earlier, why do I have a job? You don't have a job so you can do a spreadsheet. You have a job so that you can actually do something meaningful in the business. And that technology, be it a spreadsheet or any other technology, is there to help you do that job.
100%. Yeah, 100%. I would succinctly agree. But it's a challenge. It is. I'm certainly not sitting here saying we've got it right in Aviva. We're not there. We've got a long road to go. It's a challenge, but it's one that I think the more we embrace it, and I know we haven't got round to a lot of the questions that are being asked in the comments, but please do message me on LinkedIn. Let's start the conversation. Let's actually be working out in our teams. How do we do this? How do we be that expertise and that enabler?
I'll run on for a couple of minutes. We've actually reached the top of hour, but I'm going to run on just for a couple of minutes. I see Liz Simmons there saying, what an interesting discussion this week. Thanks, Chris. I'm going to end up with just one last area, and I know we can't get into it, and maybe we'll come back to another time, but just give us your ideas. And I'm really asking for the 90-second version here.
90-second.
Okay, let's reimagine in your mind's eye.
Yeah.
What does the GM function of the future look like? You've got 90 seconds. Go.
Automate things that don't add value. Start real person conversations with the right people in your assignments. So more consultative. The new GM functions are business partner and consultative functions. And the GM function of the future is one that has commerciality and business understanding actually at its heart, because ultimately we're here for our customers and the benefit to our businesses. That's fundamentally why we're here. They would be the three things. Loads to unpack there, Brian. So in the future, maybe we'll unpack that more.
Well, we'll certainly get back. What I'm going to do now is bring in our guests, our other guests, bring in Julia, and where are you? Bring in Pat, and just say thank you, Chris. That's been a fascinating,
very interesting. Yeah.
Thought-provoking. The comments are coming in, the likes are coming in, the hearts, the applauses are coming in. It's been a great conversation. Thank you again, Pat, to your tax update, and to Julia.
You're welcome.
For immigration update.
Don't forget to display the codes.
Oh gosh, thank you so much. I didn't display the codes. I knew there was a reason we had you there, Pat.
Yeah.
Okay, those are the codes.
Just adding value.
The conversation I completely forgot.
And you didn't mention all my Aviva policies. I thought we were going to mention that.
Well, I didn't want to just put out that Julia basically funds Aviva. Like she's got that many policies. I would say if anybody wants to see Ariel, add me on LinkedIn. I'll stick a picture up later, and everyone can see his beautiful face. So if you do want to see him, apologies for those that didn't bring him in.
You do realise that
that's great
for dogs too.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody. It's been a great hour. It's been great fun, and all that remains is for me to thank everybody out in LinkedIn world who's been watching, and do tune in next week for Benivo Bites, and the week after that for The View from the Top with Marissa Johnson. And please don't forget to go onto the Benivo website and nominate your top 100 service providers. And add to the fun. It's what makes mobility the fun industry it is. Thank you, everybody, and take care, and see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye.